hey, if you go out and take over this bank, this company is going to go bankrupt within 24 hours. Doug Mann, one of our right-hand men, and he was at that company, and he actually had the papers in hand to file bankruptcy. And so, and they bragged about their millions and their billions. And so I said, you know, this should be a no-brainer. I'll take that risk. If you have support it financially, I'll go out and I'll fix those schools. There's 9 schools in California, 2 in Atlanta, and 1 in Florida. So I went out there. They did not have the millions and billions, or if they did, they weren't giving them to us. And I mean, it's the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. The first week, I fired every executive there were out there. It's a big corporate office, except Doug. I kept Doug. I felt like I could trust him, and I was right. Fired everybody else because I knew they were going to second guess me. And they had PhDs, and they had Master in Finance, VP of Finance, and CFOs, and they're the ones that took this thing down, and they're much smarter than me. I'm not that smart. All I know is if I've got $20 in the checkbook, I can't spend 22. And they didn't get that aspect, even with all their degrees and everything else. And so I went in there and we started slashing expenses and putting people in that we could trust at all the campuses and firing a lot of people because they were not trustworthy, and we had a mess on our hands. But long story short, within a year we were profitable. Within the second year, we had problems with class action lawsuits. We had going concern on audited financial statements. I mean, it's a list of things that was wrong with this company. In 2 years, Doug and I and the team that we put together had that company profitable and all clean with the Department of Education, with their accrediting body, with all the state regulations and everything else. And trust me, it was a disaster because of their condition. Left there, stayed on their board, went to, I'm telling you more of the history of myself, but went to consulting for Full Sail University, the owners of Full Sail University, which is in Orlando, Florida. They are a movie producer school and digital media business, a lot of marketing degrees, and they have a school in Florida. They have a school called Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design in Denver, and they have Full Sail University, LA Film School in Hollywood, California. So they hired me to go start their high school recruiting initiative, just like our recruiters come to visit your school. So I hired management and trainers and everything else for each of their schools. Did that for 2 years. Flew East Coast to West Coast, blah, blah, blah. Got a call from a private equity group out of Chicago called Thoma Bravo. Thoma Bravo is one of the leading founders of private equity groups, believe it or not, Carl Thoma. And he called me, and they had bought a school chain up in Connecticut, Massachusetts called Porter and Chester. Great school, but their management team was taking it down faster than they could recover. And so they hired me to go change course with that company. I fired all the executive team except 1 or 2 because they're the ones that caused the problems and let things slide, and rebuild that company where they're profitable and they could make it. It took 2 years. Another private equity group called me, AEA Investors, that Doug and I were very familiar with. This guy's name is John Cozy, that ran all their purchases for academic schools. In fact, John Cozy took ITT public back in the day, big investment banker. So John, we knew John quite well. So he hires me to go down there because they had bought schools in Florida called Southwest Florida Colleges. They had 4 campuses in Florida. They also had about 6 or 7, at one time 8 or 9 campuses between Oklahoma and Texas called Platt Colleges. They hired a CEO when they bought these 2 companies, and the CEO was a dictator. He lived in Miami. He toured the campuses one time. He sent nasty emails to the executive team and left nasty voicemails and called them to merge those 2 companies, merge calendars, merge curriculums, merge everything. The team, one, did not have the experience to do that. And second of all, when you're being yelled and screamed at every day, not good, you normally don't get good results. And by the time they realized that, this company was sinking. They had 85, 90 million in revenue. And when Doug and I went out there, they had, I think, 60 or 45, 50, I don't know. And I mean, just sinking like a ship because they were so focused on trying to merge everything together with the different accrediting bodies and everything else, that they forgot about their sales and marketing, and so no students were coming in, and it was a disaster. And I told John Cozy, I said, I will not do this. I said, I'm so tired of taking these companies over with no money to work with. So I said, you've got to have some money before I ever. He's, oh, Jimmy, here's our balance sheet. He says, we got $15 million in the bank down there, blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, I can work with $15 million. I can't work with zero, because the two previous ones, we were working with $0 for these multi-million-dollar companies. And every 2 weeks, it was stressful making payroll, which is a whole nother story I won't share right now. But anyway, I get down there, we start checking, the balance sheet's all fraud. The previous CEO was sending them false financial statements every month. They had $0. And I thought, well, here we go again. But I made a commitment, but I said, I'm not that smart. But Doug is. So Doug, in the meantime, had moved to Florida. So I said, Doug, I got to have him. So I bought his contract out and to have him come join me to help me turn that one around. So we got those schools turned around in 2 years and sold. We separated the curriculums back out, the campuses back out, where it made sense for each campus and each culture, because each one had a completely different culture and everything else. So we separated it back out, got every campus profitable, and sold within 2 years to two different entities that made sense for the schools and the particular entity that bought it. So it was, in our opinion, a success. Back at the ranch, this is 2014. I moved back to the ranch in June or July of 2014. And in the meantime, we bought another cattle ranch. I was trying to grow my cow herd to 1,200 cows. I got up to over 600 cows. And life is good, but we're blowing and going. We're custom haying. I've got 5 or 6 people working for me in the summers and one full-time guy. And we were doing it all. And I love it. I love ranching to this day. But there's no money in it. You're just rolling your debt over from one year to the next and make a little headway, and you eat good, and that's about it. And you're physically fit. And again, trust me, I love it. And I had no problem with that. And if that's the way I would have ended my life, no problem. But in 2017, we weaned our calves. We were about ready to trail our cows home. It's cattle trail. We trail between ranches. It's a 3-day cattle drive. And we're about ready to do that, but I weaned our calves, and I was training my border collies on my calves, my weaned calves. We had about 350 calves out on the meadow. And I just literally praying. I said, God, I'm getting a little bored with this ranch. We're blowing and going, but I said, I'm getting a little bored. I said, I think I've got one more turnaround company in my lifetime. But I said, I'm not looking. It's got to be of you. And left it at that. A couple weeks later, I hear, oh, Wildtech's closing down. I thought, boy, my heart just jumped. I want Wildtech. That'd be awesome, because I eat, breathe, and sleep Wildtech. And then I came to my senses, it's not going to be Wildtech, because they're teaching out all the students. Well, again, our revenue comes from student tuition, period. We aren't tied to the state. We don't get state funds. We don't get any funds except student tuition. Now, again, they can borrow federal financial aid through federal financial aid, but it's still student tuition. And so they're teaching out all the students. They're going to be done in 6 months. There's no way any investor would buy Wildtech and start over, because you're starting with zero revenue. Even though if you got the company for free, there's no way you can support your losses for about 2 or 3 years, because they add up pretty quick. So I kind of got that out of my mind and said, okay, that's not going to be it. And I still get emotional because it's a God deal. So don't think anything more about it. End of January, I get a phone call from one of our bankers that I used up here, Gary Nagage, and he said, will you come meet with a bunch of business people and attorneys and bankers to talk about possibly buying Wildtech? In the meantime, and you can Google all this, and that's why I'll share most of it, but in the meantime, it was decided that Wildtech was going to be sold to the junior college, the Laramie County Community College. So I thought, well, at least it's going to land and stay open and save a few employees' jobs and so on and so forth. So that's the way it was in December and until the end of January. Like in the end of January, Gary Nagage says, hey, come over and meet with us in a week at 2 o'clock, blah, blah, blah. He says, I'm going to bring in 15, 20 people, business people and bankers, and maybe we can figure out how to buy Wildtech. And I said, yeah, I'll show up. So I showed up, and they picked my brain. They said, Jim, do you think you can find money to buy Wildtech? I said, no, there's no way. I said, I've worked for private equity and big banks all my life, or most of my life. And I said, they want profitability, they want year-over-year growth for the previous minimum 3 years. You know, they want a bright outlook, and I said, we're starting with 0 students. You know, it's not a bright outlook. And they said, well, will you try to find money? And I said, yeah, I'll try to find some, but I'm not optimistic. And they said, we'll try to find some. And so I made one phone call. In the meantime, I'm pretty good with my calculator. And I figured it's a $12 million turnaround. It'd take $12 million before you broke even. And so I made one phone call, found $3.5 million. And I can't do this. I hate asking for money. If I go borrow, no problem. But I can't ask for a partnership because I don't have anything to sell. You know, I don't even know if we can get this bought. And so found $3.5 million. Literally never made another phone call, and just said no, just wait. So that, again, that was all into January, first part of February. About February 22nd, so a month went by. I'm literally out feeding cows. It's miserable in Wyoming, wind blowing, and I got hay all over me and everything else from feeding cows. And I get an email. I normally never take my phone with me, but for that particular day, for some reason I have my phone. Email pings me. So I look, and it's State Representative Bob Nicholas. And he says, Jim, you don't know me, but you know my brother Phil. Well, Phil was in that meeting a month earlier in Laramie. But he says, we're in session. He's a state representative. He says, we're in session. He says, can you be here in an hour to answer questions about Wyotech? And I just responded back. I says, no, but I can be there an hour and a half because our ranch is an hour and 10 minutes away. And I wanted to take a shower, or they wanted me to take it. And they didn't know at that time. So I went and took a fast shower and drove as fast as I could over to Laramie, Cheyenne. And he comes out of session and introduces himself, and then for 4 hours he wanders me up and down the hallways and bathrooms and lounges and introduced me to senators. And I'm not politically involved. I don't know any of these people. Senators and state representatives. And they picked my brain on Wyotech, my experience with Wyotech the first go around, because I spent 26 years here, the first go around from student to CEO. And then also my turnaround experiences. And I told them and shared what I could and never thought anything of it. And then about 1:30, they said, oh, Jim, we scheduled a meeting with the president of the Senate, Eli Bebout. And I've never heard of Eli Bebout before in my life, but he is a person. And he was the president of the Senate. So we go into his big old office at 2 o'clock, and he has a big old huge desk, and there's 7 other senators sitting in front of his desk, and I'm just kind of sitting in the middle of those guys. He picks my brain for about 20 minutes, and then he just cuts to the chase. He's, Jim, he said, we're about ready to give $5 million to the community college to buy Wyotech. And he said, we aren't sure it's a good idea. And I looked him in the eye and said, it's not a good idea unless you want to fund it every year. And he says, well, why? I said, because they put their business plan on their website. And I said, I read it, and they don't spend any money on advertising and marketing. They don't know how to sell it. I says, they think students are just going to show up automatically and attend this. I said, they will not. I said, not in the quantity that makes it feasible. So I said, you'll be funding it every year. And he said, well, we don't want to do that. And he says, what happens if I just loan that money to you over 10 years at 2.5% interest? He said, would that help you buy Wyotech? And I said, yes, it sure would. And so he barks an order to a senator sitting right beside me. He says, go get Dave Groover. And again, I wouldn't recognize Dave Groover to this day, but that's his name. But so I had no idea who Dave Groover was. But this senator jumps up, runs back in about 4 minutes, and Dave Groover comes in with a notepad, and he says, how can I help you, Mr. President? He said, change this bill such a number so Mathis can apply to borrow $5 million over 10 years at 2.5% interest. And he says, put it in there that the governor and the Wyoming State Business Council has to make up their mind and make a decision whether they loan it to Mathis or give it to the community college. And I'm sitting there, I've never seen or heard anything like that before in my life. This craziest day of my life. Things like that just never happen. But I'm thinking, am I dreaming? This is crazy. So sure enough, it all worked out. Again, it's a long story from there on, but so that I get out of that meeting. That's Wednesday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. By the time I got out, we met with the governor after that, and we had to update him on that. Oh yeah, bills being changed as we speak. It's being voted on Friday, and it's going to be up to you to decide whether you're going to give the money to the community college or loan it to me. Because I don't know anything about it. It just happened 10 minutes ago, so you will know about it. Anyway, so I get out from meeting with all the politicians, and I called my wife. I said, Mary, I said, when I came to Cheyenne today, I said, we're $500,000 in debt. She said, yeah. I said, we're $5.5 million in now. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I think it'll be all right. So, and on the way to Cheyenne that day, I called my dad. He was getting old. So I called in and checked on him, and he said, oh, what are you doing today? And so I just got done feeding cows, and I got a crazy email, and I'm headed to Cheyenne to talk to all the politicians and the governor and everything else. So he got a kick out of that, because again, we are not politically involved, and I don't want to be politically involved. And so he tells my sister, that evening, my sister or my brother-in-law texted me, he said, hey, we need to talk. So the next morning I called my brother-in-law, David. He says, what are you doing over there hobnobbing with all the politicians? I said, how did you find out? Oh, he says, Gail went in to check on Dad, and he told her, and she told me, what are you doing over there? I said, David, it's the craziest day of my life. I said it. So I told him the story, and I said, I think it might work. And I said, then I made a comment. I said, all I have to do is find another $7 million, which I found $3.5 million already. He said, I'm good for the other 3.5. I'm saying, are you kidding me? It's normally always about the money, the money, the money. And it's just like, this is not going to be about the money. It's going to be, trying to get this thing under contract, because they already said they wouldn't sell it originally. Is that right, Sean? Originally they said they are not going to sell it. They're just going to close it down and teach it out. Then they said, oh, we'll sell to a nonprofit. So that's why the team at Wyotech, they actually get the true credit. I don't get any credit. The team that was left at Wyotech, they fought to keep this campus open. So they'd set the stage, but because the parent company said they'd only sell to a nonprofit, they worked with the community college, rightfully so. So now that I'm drawn into this mess, I have to reach out to the CEO of this multi-billion-dollar company. His name is Jeremy Wheaton, and it's a God thing how I got connected with him and got his personal cell phone number, and we stay in touch to this day. But I said, Jeremy, would you hear my story? And because I said, I'm interested in trying to buy Wyotech. And he said, yes. So the first 20 minutes of my conversation, I said, listen, I'm a student of Wyotech. I went from student to teacher to CEO, told him a quick story and how much it changed my life and it meant to me. And I said, and I want to buy Wyotech. He says, is that going to be for a profit company or not for profit? I said, it's going to be for a profit. I said, I'm proud for paying tax, being able to pay taxes so you guys can be a nonprofit. And he says, okay. He said, I'm not promising anything, Jim, but he said, I'll take an offer. So I started negotiating with him, and literally it takes about 6 months. Again, this we're into March now. It normally takes minimum of 6 months to work through the U.S. Department of Education and the accrediting body to get all your paperwork approved to buy a school or sell. Time was running out. I mean, and fortunately, we have great politicians, and we have, again, it's a God deal, but we had them write on our behalf to the Department of Education, say, listen, try to work with Jim, because we don't have 6 months. It ended up 6 weeks, literally 6 weeks before we had to sign contract to be able to buy Wyotech. And because the governor wanted to actually give the money to the community college, the business council wanted to loan it to me. So they were in conflict. In the meantime, the CEO of this multi-billion-dollar company, he says, Jim, he said, I won't sign a contract because you don't have your financing in place. I go to the business council, I said, well, you don't have a contract, we can't loan you the money. So it's this yin and yang, yin and yang, yin and yang, and one short more story because it's a God deal. But we're out of time. We're literally out of time. And they pulled some shenanigans as far as the parent company. At one time they wanted to keep the Wyotech name, and I said, no, we'll walk away. And then they came back and said, okay. And then they forced us to take the housing. And I'm thinking, I didn't want housing, I'm worried about housing when we got a student vote. Best thing ever is they forced us to take the housing because we got it for little or nothing. And so time was running out. So we're into March, mid-March, into March. And so we put in there on a Monday a revised letter of intent. And the first time we put in there, and it's in bold print, was in the first paragraph, you have until Thursday night at 6 o'clock to respond and accept this offer, or we're walking away. Not because we want to walk away, we are out of time. We do not have time to put this thing together. And from the accrediting body as well as the U.S. Department of Education. So, again, that was on a Monday. They had 6 o'clock on Thursday to respond. So Wednesday, I get a call from the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. He's Jim. He says, we got to get this thing off center and get a decision to you. He's my whole team, and there's about 7 or 8 of them in his team in his office. He's working with the governor this afternoon. He says, we're going to try to talk him into siding with us so we can get you an answer about this $5 million loan. I said, thank you. And he's, regardless, he said, I will call you this afternoon and let you know how it goes. And I said, okay, great. So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sure enough, he calls me up. He says, Jim, he said, our meeting with the governor went really, really well. But he said, here's what the governor asks of you. He wants you to write a letter on his behalf to the CEO of this company stating that we're going to give you the loan, but he says the last sentence or two has to be a weasel clause so the governor can get out of it. And my mind is crazy. They had 7 people from the business council taking notes, because that's all they do is take notes when the CEO's talking to the governor. I thought they could have drafted this letter. They have the exact perspective of what the governor said, blah, blah, blah. But the governor is asking me, the high school dropout, to write a letter on his behalf to the CEO of this multi. I just thought that was funny. But all I said was absolutely no problem. So that was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and so we start drafting a letter immediately. So about 8 o'clock that night, my wife and I were literally sitting on the couch watching TV, and of course I can't think of anything except Wild Tech, and knowing that tomorrow at 6 o'clock, we're either walking away if they don't respond, but I don't even know if the letter of intent was almost identical to the previous one except one sentence about you have to respond by Thursday at 6. So I thought, how do I notify the CEO to make sure that, and we never had no communication from Monday to Wednesday night. So how do I tell or ask Jeremy Wheaton if he read that, hey, you've got tomorrow at 6 o'clock to respond to us, without ticking him off and saying, Jim, get out of my hair, you know, I'm a multi-billion-dollar company and blah, 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 blah. So I wrote him an email, and again, we copied all these emails because it's truly an unbelievable deal. But anyway, all I said was, I sent him an email. I said, Jeremy, I hope we have a positive response by tomorrow at 6. That way, if he didn't read that letter of intent, it would trigger something, go back and read it. If he did read it, he would say, you know, whatever he said. Again, this is 8 o'clock Wyoming time. He's back in Minnesota, so it's 9 o'clock back there. He immediately responds. He says, Jim, again, remember what happened that day. Jim, if I could only hear from the governor, it would help me make my decision. And I mean, I just literally broke down and cried. I said, so I respond back. I says, you're gonna have a letter from the governor very shortly. I didn't tell him because I'm writing it for him. But I knew it. And I thought, if that isn't a God deal, and so I give credit to God for all this, because it's not me. I've been able to surround myself with an awesome team, and we are blowing and going, and we love what we do, but it's been a crazy experience getting this thing, and then COVID hit, and that's a whole nother story. You know, most schools went online and this and that and everything else, and we literally the management team sat in the conference room, and we'd tear up because what do we do with this thing? We just started, you know, we aren't profitable, you know, and I'm a fighter, you know, and so I got in my head that I was going to do the cowboy thing, and I do the cowboy thing quite often, and the cowboy thing is just take your bloody nose and make it work. So I got in my head that we're going to just open up, to heck with it, because this was a mandate. It wasn't a law, but I knew I'd get sued by someone. I had no idea, so Doug and I can't remember who else, 2 or 3 other people from the team, we went down and hired the nastiest attorney in Laramie because we knew we were going to be sued, and so we thought, I want the nasty attorney on my side. I don't want someone hired to sue me. And so we go down there and we meet with him, and I told him, I said, I want to open up Wild Tech. I said, you know, it's not a law, it's a mandate, blah, blah, blah. And will you defend us? He said, yes, I will. But he said, Jim, he says, I used to be a state representative. My his brother, Bob Nichols, the one that emailed me to get over there in the first place. He says, my brother's Bob. He says, I've got the governor's cell phone number. He said, let me just reach out to him and see if we can't get his approval. And so it's all good. And I thought, well, that's a novel idea. Let's try it. So within a within a week, we have the governor's signature signed off that on our reopen plan with the state health department's reopen, or approval to reopen, and we had the county health department to reopen. And we had to wear masks for 2 weeks. Most of us threw the masks away. And we don't care. Anybody wants to wear them, we don't care. We just want a personal decision or a personal responsibility. That's why we ran it, and we opened up, and we just, and we put that, since we had the governor and he was part of our press release, made comments in our press, we put that out to our future students and parents and instructors, and our numbers have just shot up. And I thought, if that isn't a God deal, nothing is, you know? So anyway, we are very fortunate, we're very blessed, and as you can tell, I love what I do. It's just we have a passion to teach students and see them succeed, and that's why we live for it. So anyway, yes.
I'm really glad I asked that question.
It's a crazy deal. And that's the short version. Yeah.
So I have a question. So you're